And as I say it, it even feels like icky for some reason because I think that I'm like, I don't deserve that help. Like I don't deserve their help.
Sure.
So like, why am I asking for their help if I don't deserve it? But I'm like, why do I think that I don't deserve it?
I think the fear around asking for help for me comes around like the vulnerability and like not being sure about sharing that. Welcome to Something More Human. I'm Sam.
And I'm Elliot. We're a married couple exploring human connection and its impact on ours, our guests, and our listeners' lives.
Join us in creating something more human. Today, we want to talk about, I was going to say we want to talk about something vulnerable, but I feel like every episode we're talking about something vulnerable.
Yeah.
So lately we've been thinking a lot about what does it mean to need and ask for help, especially in regards to our relationships. And not just like help in really big ways. I feel like that's where my mind goes when I think about asking for help is like major ways that I might need someone.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw a short form video the other day that basically said, as your friend, if you mean something really important to me, as someone who is important in your life, you sort of rob me of the joy and the pleasure and the satisfaction of being a shoulder to lean on if you don't explicitly ask for my help. And that was very thought-provoking for me.
Yeah. And do you find yourself asking your friends for help?
I think that when I need support, if I go to my friends vulnerably and say, like, here's what I'm struggling with, like shit's hitting the fan, I'm asking for kind of like emotional support.
Mm-hmm.
And when I don't do that, I do feel more lonely. And I think that when the roles are reversed and I have a friend that's going through something, my tendency is to want to give them space to work through it unless they explicitly ask me for help.
Sure. And do you ever ask them if they need help?
I haven't yet.
Really? At all? You never do? You've never asked any of your friends if they need help? Is that what you're saying?
I don't necessarily say, do you need help? I say, let me know if there's something that I can do for you.
I feel like that's kind of the same thing, but I think that's where, we keep touching on it over and over. And I think it's just going to be a theme of our lives, but of the podcast by proxy, which is like how powerful language is, how powerful intentional communication is, because that is still a little bit different than, how can I help you? How can I help you is very explicit, and you can even go into detail, like I did with Kay yesterday, like just going into detail about the things that we can actually do, and like sort of putting different ideas in people's minds to let them know, oh, like I didn't realize that I could ask for that, or I didn't even think about that, but like it's nice to know that they're offering to help me in that way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that you're always talking about the power of language and the words help versus like do. I think spark different emotional responses for me, even though they're getting at the same thing, like the intention behind them may be the same. Let me know if there's anything I can do versus how can I help? I think there's just something emotionally charged that's different about those questions and those specific words.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's give a real life example. What's a way that you've like asked for help or needed help, or we have stepped up to the plate to answer that question?
I'm trying to think if I reached out to like friends for help. Like obviously at the networking event, they prompted with like, what can we do? So I guess that's different, isn't it? But then we asked for the help, which is like, just tell someone that you know about our event. You know what I mean? But I feel like I've leaned on Ramon, like I think he knows that I'm okay with asking for help, and he's let us know that he wants to help, which it's very obvious that he has. Do you know what I mean? But I am thinking maybe I haven't explicitly gone to a friend and said, I need help in this way. And as I say it, it even feels like icky for some reason, because I think that I'm like, I don't deserve that help. Like I don't deserve their help.
Sure.
So like, why am I asking for their help if I don't deserve it? But I'm like, why do I think that I don't deserve it? But then I'm like, well, I would help them. So like, it's a reciprocal relationship. I think every relationship, like unconditional relationships don't exist. Like even with Venus, man, that's a conditional relationship. If she was shitting in the house every single day and like tearing the house apart, then maybe kidding.
You would love her less.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, inevitably. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think that I'm realizing now that maybe I don't ask enough because sometimes I feel like I don't deserve it. But I think that if I know that I've helped them, and that's what it's about. It's about balance, you know?
Yeah, I think that the fear around asking for help for me comes from uncertainty of, or hold on. I think the fear around asking for help for me comes around like the vulnerability and like not being sure about sharing that. So for example, obviously the event is coming up, right? By the time this episode comes out, I think we should be camping. We will be fresh off the event, trying to relax and restore. Hopefully I am reading a book in a hammock by the time this reaches your ears. Manifesting that for myself. So the event is coming up. We would love to see 75 people in the room. Our goal is 75 people. When our friends lately, this past week, have been asking, how is the event going? It's coming up. Are you excited? How are things? I have one of two options. One option is things are great. We're really excited. We got Sweet Green to do the catering. We have these sponsors. The giveaway is going to be amazing. All of those things are true. But the thing that's at the forefront of my mind, which is the other path, is ticket sales are not where we would love them to be by this point in time. And I think that by sharing that vulnerability, we're hearkening back to last episode. We're admitting to some kind of failure. But that doesn't mean anything about our character. And I think that it also incentivizes the people who care about us to want to share it with 5 people. You know, if I said we have 75 tickets sold, there's no need for them to go share it with their 5 closest friends or put it on their story on social.
Right.
But if I say, actually, we're kind of struggling, that's me admitting something vulnerable. Right. Because this is kind of our baby. So like ideally everything goes off perfectly. And it enables them to lean in a way that I really need.
For sure.
Do you know what I mean?
No, I think that's a really good point. And I actually never really thought about it like that, which comes back again to like communication and just being upfront with like your emotions and like with your intentions. Do you know what I mean? Like if you really need help from somebody, tell them, but also be specific about it. And we're not, we're not looking for pity or anything. Like and I love that you and I are sharing this because I feel like it needs to be done. Like being worried about the event or being worried about selling tickets. It's like, you're right. If we're not specific enough about that, about the want and about the, concern, we can't expect the person we're telling to read our minds.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? Like they sometimes people need that. Everyone's different, but I think it's just more effective. I'm thinking of a friend. If they tell, if they're very vague about what it is that they're looking for me, I can only do so much.
Right.
But I mean, if they're telling me very specifically, like, I'm out of time, I'm out of money, like I really need your help with, getting my name out there or my brand, like, okay, like let's brainstorm. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, I mean, I think there's also a difference between complaining for the sake of catharsis and sharing where you're at emotionally, financially, physically, whatever, in search of support. I think those are two very distinct things. And when we're talking about emotional support, I think that is where the line is especially gray between like talking shit to talk shit and to have the catharsis of gossip or complaining or whatever versus like I had the worst day, like the smoothie exploded, like I was late, the tire on my car burst, like all of those things. And actually it would be really awesome if you could come over for dinner or if you could, I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's a distinction worth talking about. Do you want to go there? Like when that distinction is on the other side of someone's maybe complaining about the same thing day after day or quarter after quarter or year after year, it's the same story. You had a conversation with someone that I think you've mentioned around, we were talking to Noah about when friends come to you and complain about the same thing, there kind of reaches a point as your friend where you say, okay, shit or get off the pot. Are you going to do something about this problem?
Right.
Or is there something specific that you're looking for from me around affirmation of how you're feeling,
Right.
brainstorming of ways to move forward? If you're just complaining for the sake of complaining, I would like to be excluded from that from now on and setting that boundary.
Yeah, and that's really difficult for people to do. That's difficult for me to do. I'm sure that would be difficult for you to do, but I think that if we like value, if we mean what we say by like, the people in our lives are what make our lives, good or fulfilling or whatever, then those conversations just like have to be had.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a place that we should continue pursuing in these conversations because it's true and it is really hard. And I can't even say that I've had a few really difficult conversations with friends, but I think that those conversations actually probably should happen more often because I think that we do as human beings have a tendency to get stuck in our ways. And then we are kind of complaining to our friends all the time about the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's one thing to realize it because then you should just nip it in the bud. But it's another thing to like have your friend come up and tell you, and this is kind of a need to help in a way too, right? Like I need your help by setting boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Like our friendship will be better for it if you help me by letting me explain to you in this uncomfortable conversation that like, here's the boundary that I've set, which is like, I've given you all that I can give you.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not even that I'm going to stop giving you advice. Like I don't even want to be a sounding board anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because sometimes people are just looking for a listen, but if it's about the same thing over and over, like your job is to tell your friend, like here, I'll listen. And then here are some suggestions based on what I know about you and because I love you. And it's your job to do something about it. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I think that maybe a litmus test for either setting boundaries or sort of like the purpose of someone in your life around these conversations is how compelled you feel to lie. I was talking with a friend recently around like, okay, one of my friends did something that I think is kind of stupid. And I want to point out to her, like, why did you do this? What was the purpose of this? And from the outside looking in, it seems to be to your detriment. Mm-hmm. And when she tried to broach the conversation, her friend lied to her about what was like the impetus for this situation to kind of remove herself.
Interesting.
And I think that that's a great point of reflection is if you feel compelled to lie to your friends about certain things,
right,
that should be a huge red flag around A, what kind of people you have in your life and the purpose of them.
Yeah.
And B, what kind of decisions you're making around ways that you interact with the world or ways that you may need support or help. And like, I don't know, I am maybe anti-lying to a fault. Like I generally try really hard not to lie because I just think it's a totally unnecessary complication and web in life.
Totally.
I understand the benefit of a white lie every now and then, but I think it could be a great point of reflection if you find yourself lying to people that you love or people that are close to you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with that. You're a bad liar too, which I think I think it's a strength of yours.
My parents would tell you otherwise.
This is true. You've matured.
I'm just not an angsty teenager anymore.
Sure. But yeah, I think the feeling compelled to lie is such a freaking, you hit it the nail on the head because I think about that and I've definitely absolutely done that and feel like that happens pretty often actually. Like a little white lie here to sort of cover your ass or save face or appear stronger or appear better than, and I think that's a defense mechanism at the end of the day, but like it's not healthy.
No, yeah,
it's
for
not.
sure.
It's not healthy at the end of the day. If it's prolonged and it's just consistent. But
this goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of the episode around robbing your friends of the opportunity to be good friends. I think that if you're lying to them, you're also robbing them of the opportunity, A, to get to know you on a deeper level, and B, to have rich conversations and brainstorming when you're keeping things hidden or keeping it back. And I just feel incredibly impacted by the idea of if I'm your friend and I love you and I'm in your life and you don't allow me to know you and support you, you're robbing me of the ability to be a great friend or the pleasure of being a support system. And I think that's a really interesting perspective because it's incredibly vulnerable. And I think a lot of us have an underlying kind of narrative that we're undeserving or not good enough for that kind of love, support, help. someone holding space for that kind of vulnerability.
Hmm.
Like this, I think the core of this is really vulnerability.
Hmm.
And that's scary. It's really scary sometimes. And people might not receive it well. But I think the risk versus reward of you being vulnerable and a friend receiving it well and offering you the support, whatever it looks like, that you may need, and the friendship and the love is totally worth the risk.
See, and this is why I smoke weed.
Okay.
Because yesterday you were out at Pilates and I was like, I really need to go for a walk. Even though the air quality was the 8th worst in the world.
I told you.
Denver's air quality is the 8th worst in the world as of 2 days ago. It got worse yesterday. And it was so crazy how many people were at the park just chilling, even though most of us know like all of this smog is from fires in Canada. Anyway, so I knew that, and I decided to also burn up some weed and take a walk.
You said smoke who? Bad air quality who?
The heck?
You're like, the air quality is so bad, I'm really worried about walking in the park, but I'm just going to inhale a bunch of direct smoke, but it's totally fine.
Yeah, but it was only for a few seconds. This smoke out there is forever, well, until it moves away. Anyway, so that's why I was like, okay, well, I do want to be in that vulnerable place, and like I think I can only do that. And maybe that's a problem, me saying that right now, but it is what it is, at least at this point in my life. Like, maybe I'm a little bit too dependent on marijuana to help me get to that place. But that's why I do it, because it helps me get there. And I don't really know how else to get there without it. So anyway, I smoke and I'm walking all the way to the park. And I have this like itch to call Joe. And as I'm calling him, I'm like, okay, if Joe doesn't answer, that's a sign to not like put my phone down back in my pocket, but actually to call Ramon. So I call Joe. Joe always answers, or almost always, but it goes straight to voicemail. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So then I call Ramon, and Ramon picks up, and I just like the floodgates open up, dude. And I just like, I think that was the first time I've ever like cried in front of, but even though it was over the phone, to Ramon. And I was just telling him like what a great friend he was, and how much I appreciated, his support. And I didn't really, I guess in that moment, ask for help, but I feel like I know he's always down to do that. Which is really special.
Help can look like holding space for this kind of vulnerability.
Totally. And that's what he did. He literally just like listened the whole time and didn't cut in. And I feel like that's what I do. I need to get better at just listening. And he just let me talk. And then anyway, I went around the park. It's a really big park, so it took a while. And we get on the topic of, sort of recreating ourselves and evolving and constantly trying to be better. And he was talking about, this saying in his head, which is basically like, you have to die to live. Like you have to kill parts of yourself to become a new person, right? To be the person that you want to be. I'm walking, but I'm during this conversation, as this is happening, as Ramon is telling me this, I'm walking and I just want to sit. So I find a park bench, and on this bench is a book. I forgot the author. The book is called Life After Death. And I was like, yo, what in the frick? So I tell Ramon that, and Ramon was like, whoa, dude, like that's giving me goosebumps. And we're just talking about this idea of, there's a lot of power in rebirth and like killing some parts of yourself. And that doesn't even have to be really heavy. Like killing a part of yourself could literally mean like packing up and moving to a new apartment, which Ramon is about to do, or getting rid of your car, you know what I mean? Or
metamorphosis,
rebranding, all of these various things. Do you know what I mean? And so, he's moving out and we're moving out sort of at the same time. So we're talking about this idea and this concept and how it gives you actually a lot of power and perspective. And it's very easy for you to do if you want. You can recreate your life whenever you want. I think it's really about perspective. You don't have to move out of your house. I think there are ways to do that. And so we have that conversation, really powerful, and it ends. And so I'm walking, and Joe's called me at that time. He called me, but I didn't answer because I was talking to Ramon. So then I call him back. He doesn't answer. We're playing phone tag. And I'm like, well, I really want to tell Joe this because I'm having this thought as Ramon and I are talking about life after death and recreating yourself. And I'm like, just trying to be honest with myself and think about like what it is that I need to die to. And it's been said, so many times, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse. So I'm not trying to, I feel like it's corny, but it's whatever. I'm taking responsibility now. So I'm like, I send this voice memo to Joe, and I'm like, I always tell you, we always tell each other about the things that we struggle with. And like one of mine is Twitter, because it's just like constant negative information. And I realize like that I'm sick. Like I realize like that my soul and my spirit is sick. Like I feel like I can feel it. And I'm like, well, that's, if I'm being honest, like the only place that's coming from, it's certainly not you. It's not my friends. Like, it's the world that I'm choosing to expose myself to.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, if I really want to die to myself, like, which I need to, like, in order to move forward in our marriage, in order to move forward with the podcast, like, I need to, you know, completely remove myself of as much, you know, negative information as possible. Whatever feeds the negativity, you have to get rid of. If it's possible, sometimes maybe it's not in certain circumstances. But mine, I'm like, it's Twitter, it's avoidable. And this is the part that I feel weird about sharing, but I'll just do it anyway. And I was like, well, and maybe it shouldn't be that heavy. We talked about it last night on the couch. Like, so if you don't know, like, when you deactivate your Twitter, it's funny. It gives you basically 30 days. It's like, are you sure you want to? Like, did you make a mistake? Well, if you change your mind, you have 30 days. So, like, your account is technically not searchable. You can't get on it, but you still have 30 days. So I told Sam, like, you know, in 31 days, like, we're going to check back. I'm deactivating my Twitter, and in 31 days, we're going to check back. And if my Twitter is up when I log it, if my Twitter is up when I go to Twitter, that means I've logged back in those 30 days. And maybe we should think about, like, getting a divorce. And that sounds like really fucking haphazard and super, like, intense. And I'm like, well, it's not, though. Like, if I really, thanks for this, letting me have this soliloquy or this monologue.
You're welcome.
But it's not that big of a deal. It's like, okay, like, if we're in agreement that this thing is, like, hurting me, and so it's hurting us and it's hurting everything around me and us, then, and it's possible to cut it out. And you know that to cut it out would, like, do great things for your life and for your marriage and for everything, for the people around you, then, like, it's not even it's a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm.
It just needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't, then, like, here's what we're talking about, coming back to, like, should I get off the pot?
Mm-hmm.
Like, telling my friends the same thing that, you know, I'm always struggling with. It's like, okay, well, why not just do it? Because I have the capacity to do it. It's not heroin. It's not heroin. It's something that's, you know, even though we've talked about it, I think, like, phone addiction is very real, but, like, alcohol addiction is very real. Heroin addiction is very real. Maybe you could argue those are worse. They're definitely probably worse. But this feels like that. But I also know that it's possible to get rid of. So if I don't get rid of it, then what am I telling you? And I think that's where I'm talking about. Now we're talking about help. And I think without telling you that I need your help, because I don't need your help to do that. But we're sort of already having that conversation, right? By being, like, super vulnerable with each other and being overly communicative for me to tell you, like, I need to explain this because I need you to agree with me. And if you don't, then we need to have a conversation. But if you agree with me, then you can agree that if at the end of 30 days, I've gotten back onto Twitter, that really does mean that I don't care about our marriage enough. It just does. First, it means that I don't care about my own life, my well-being. But that also equals that I don't care about our marriage. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that what you're saying is both purpose-driven, and the help that you're asking for is accountability. So the purpose is not simply, I want to get off Twitter. The purpose is, I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better CEO.
Yeah.
I want to be a better friend. And I want to be a better, like, member of society. And that purpose is pretty high. I would say that purpose is asking yourself to go to higher levels and, like, be a more elevated version of yourself, right?
For sure.
Those are high stakes.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is, in order to achieve that, I need to really put something that matters to me on the line and raise the stakes.
Exactly.
Because the purpose is very high. Versus if the purpose was just, I want to get off Twitter.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, how you've tried to do it in the past.
Right.
Those are sort of low stakes. Like, what do you have to lose, really, if you log back in? Nothing.
Exactly.
But if you say, in order to be my higher self, in order to be the best person that I can be, those are big stakes. I need help remaining accountable. And I also need you to, like, keep that bar high for me.
We'll keep the bar high for yourself, too. Do you know what I mean?
Sure, yeah. And I think what's interesting is when you first said this, I was like, wow, it's, like, kind of dramatic. Like, do you really want to put our marriage on the line? And then I was like, okay, it's interesting that I'm questioning that, because that means that I don't believe in you.
Right.
And if you're not capable of staying off Twitter for 30 days, like, we have bigger fish to fry.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually, I've gone in the last 24 hours since that happened, or the last whatever, I've gotten
back into Twitter. Imagine that's what you're saying.
No, I've hit in Twitter because it's reflex, right? So I go to Twitter, but then it's not there. I'm like, oh, obviously right away I remember, and I'm like, okay, see you later. And so now I'm realizing, like, right away how my brain's already rewiring, like, going to different social media sites who inevitably have different algorithms, right? Like Facebook I'm going to Facebook more, and like I feel like Facebook is more mindless, but there's also family on Facebook, and I think that there's value there. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
And then Instagram is kind of like business stuff, so I'm not on that just messing around.
Can I give you a challenge?
Stuff. TikTok's cool too, man, but it's basically been Facebook, which is funny. I'm like, maybe I am getting old.
Why? Because you like Facebook more?
Yeah.
Can I give you a challenge?
Yeah.
I know the challenge really is like stay off Twitter for 30 days, but I would love to see you rearrange all of the apps on your phone and see now, like you put the calculator app where the Facebook app is, and you put the photo app where the Instagram app is, and rearrange them and see truly how mindlessly you go to reach for those apps.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to see that. I challenge you listeners to do that. If you love challenges from us and want more, we do a challenge from us to you every single episode inside of the Something More Society. But
honestly, sick plug, dude.
I couldn't hold this one back.
Sick plug. That wasn't even planned, but that's a good plug. This episode is sponsored by the Something More Society.
Yeah. And a little more humanity, which is keeping us hydrated.
Honestly, this tea is so sick, dude.
I've been thinking about it all day.
It's so tight. And we should be proud of ourselves because it's in a few places, and Blind Tiger wants it. Has it. Mm-hmm. No, I don't think it's on the menu yet, but they got it from us, and they have a bag in their store, in their bar, in their tap room. So cool.
Themes that continually come up for us are intention. And so as I think about purpose, which feels like a theme of this episode, I think explicitly stating purpose or intention in the framework of asking for help is a tool that we could all maybe benefit from using more often. For example, we were talking earlier about, okay, someone's complaining to you or you're complaining to someone and you're giving advice back. It could be that someone's not sharing it with you for the purpose of receiving advice, but they would love to voice it to someone. They would love that space to be held, and they would love to be acknowledged that that's how they're feeling. And I think it's our instinct to give advice or give solutions because we want to be helpful, but sometimes that's not always the best way to be helpful. So if you're the person asking for help, maybe identifying for yourself what kind of support would be helpful to you. Is it holding space? Is it ordering me Uber Eats? Is it finding time that we can hang out together and go to the park and play a game? Is it sending me a recipe that I can make for dinner so I don't have to think about it? Like, what is the thing that would be really helpful from your friend? And if you're the friend, maybe asking explicitly, what kind of ways can I help you right now? Do you want me to just listen and hold space?
Right.
Or would you like me to be thought partnering with you on solutions and paths forward? And
I feel like that's especially hard for men to have that conversation with those words. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's intention, though. I think that we have not necessarily done a great job as a society equipping men with the tools to communicate intention and emotion. And so it's just like a muscle that you have to build. Like, that wouldn't come naturally to me if I weren't thinking about it consciously.
Sure. So, ask your friends for help. Truly. Ask your friends for help, you know?
And I would say, consider purpose when you can be the friend offering help.
Exactly.
And I'm maybe we would be remiss without hearkening back to vulnerability here. It's freaking scary to offer up that piece of yourself that is in need of help or support in some way. But if you're doing it to people who care about you, the risk is worth the reward.
When I'm thinking about the power of language, I'm like, but should we even be saying that?
That it's scary?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel scared. I have fear around asking for help.
Yeah, and I think that I'm catching myself and imagine what people would say was like, you don't maybe have this certain trauma about this relationship that, ended tragically in my life as a result of being vulnerable, right? But I guess for me, I think the thing I'm most scared of is like appearing weak, or it just completely changing my relationship with somebody by being this vulnerable, and then they're like, oh, that wasn't the vibe that I thought we had.
I think
so. I guess it makes sense.
Well, two things. I think that that's an extremely valid fear, because we're talking about the fear of being vulnerable. and exposing that part of yourself.
Fear of losing a friend, potentially.
Well, and number 2, here's my thing. I'm going to push on you. If I expose that part of myself and I commit to being vulnerable, and then that person doesn't receive it well and isn't open to hearing me out or offering me support, or somehow now thinks less of me because I've shown that vulnerability, is that even a friend that I want?
Exactly. I mean, exactly. And I think that's actually the thing that scares people is they don't want to find out. They don't, like, I think that it's always on people's minds. I really believe that. I think that everyone is, at the end of the day, looking for a very intentional connection. That's who we are as human beings. And I think that's why there's so much, like, suffering. Because getting that vulnerable is really difficult nowadays. Because we're spending just, more time distracted doing other things. And so, like, I think that we're all afraid to reveal what already seems a little bit obvious, which is, like, that we're actually not as close as we appear to be. Or we're actually never going to be as close as I want to be. And I would rather not go there.
Sure.
And I'd rather it just be unnamed, and I'd rather it just be, a subconscious thought between me and the universe, or between potentially both of us. That energy has totally existed in friendships of mine before, where it's like we both know that it's kind of shallow, and, to go any further, if we tried, like that, I think that's when it would blow up. And I'd rather keep something than have nothing.
Oh, that's a very interesting perspective. I think that's also the same mindset around, like, we talked a couple of episodes back around the big leap and the way that our subconscious mind holds us back. I think it's a very similar mindset around fear of success. Like, I don't want to find out that I'm actually not capable of reaching that goal. I would rather never try and never find out.
Right.
And never be confronted with that as fact. Then deal with that. So that, I think that's really interesting and kind of scary, I guess. Like, your options are a little tiny bit of something, or lonely. But I think maybe shifting the perspective of, if it did blow up, you would be opening yourself up, time, energy, whatever wise, to explore a friendship with someone else.
Right.
And I think that is maybe more of an abundance, glass half full mindset. That there's how many billion people in the world?
They're about 8.
Surely we can find somebody to be vulnerable with that really actually gives a shit about you.
It's interesting when people say, well, how many people are there on the earth? I'm like, well, you're probably never, ever going to be around about 7.75 billion of them anyway. So, like...
No, but still.
I'm kidding. No, you're right. You're totally right. And I completely agree with that. And I think that's powerful just to say out loud, because it gives it truth. It gives it more value. And then you can't really go back. You can't be like, oh, I didn't actually mean that. It's like, really? You didn't mean that? You know what I mean? I think it's important to say, on the podcast, like, to yourself, in the mirror, in the shower, like,
And maybe it's also a mindset around, like, that we are worthy of those relationships. We are worthy of having someone in our life that actually cares.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're as worthy as the amount of care from someone as we're willing to give them, period. That's just it. You know what I mean? And if you feel like you give a lot of care, then you should demand that from friends. Truly. I mean, demand's a strong word, but, like, you should communicate that.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that it would be, hopefully, in a healthy, like, marriage or, like, a romantic relationship. Like, we need to see friendships as that way more often, because we have way more friendships than we do romantic relationships. Like, at least at a time we do. Like, generally, if we're dating someone, it's one person, and then you have 10, 15, 20, maybe 3 or 4, at least, more than one friend. And so those become really, really important. There's a higher percentage of relationships that you have that are platonic than romantic.
Yeah,
for most of us.
You read my mind. I was just going to remind everyone of the idea, like, when in doubt, what would you do in a romantic relationship?
Yeah, exactly.
You wouldn't want someone that, like, maybe sort of kind of cares about you.
Right.
You would say, okay, fine. I'm going to go back into the dating pool. There are so many fish in the sea, or whatever the platitude is.
Totally, exactly.
Same thing for friends.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
Love you, man.
I hope you all get some tea and share something vulnerable, ask for help and support, and offer it in return.
Yeah, we'll ask for help. If you're watching this on YouTube, one of our 67 subscribers, or if this came up in your algorithm and you like it, give us a like, and maybe tell us where you, or how you found us, or why you're here, or what you like, or maybe what you don't like, what you think we could explore or expand upon. That would mean a lot. I think that yeah, I think that would mean a lot. So I think that you could do that for us. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, give us a follow. That also helps too. A nice review would be great. And yeah, if you like what you see on this table, the tea, honestly, dude, the tea is so sick.
And we're not just saying that because it's ours.
I need new language.
Also,
it's just great.
You can slide into our DMs on Instagram. Someone sent us a message the other day and said, "Is Sam a Virgo or a Capricorn?" And I was like, I'm a Libra, but my Virgo is in moon. My moon is in Virgo. Mm-hmm. And then she said, "Damn, this girl really is organized." I was like, "That legit. It's just it's fun to chat with you guys in the DM." So I'm not just saying that to be like if you follow, please like and subscribe and leave us a comment. Like, actually do, and we'll actually respond, and we actually like it. If
you've been watching for a while and you want to find, another way to support us or a new way to support us, you join the Something More Society. It's $6 a month, and we're trying to, curate some really intentional conversations in there. It's kind of like our events, but inside a digital container. And we're really excited about it. We're just going to keep putting videos out every other week for you, and hopefully create a really cool chat community, and I think it'll grow and be way more than we realize at the moment, as is life. So anyway, we'd love to see you there, and we'll put a link in the description below.
Ta-ta for now.
Ta-ta for now. Sam and I want to thank you so much for listening to Something More Human. If you're enjoying the podcast and want to support us, there are plenty of no-cost, minimal effort ways you can do so.
For starters, you can subscribe to the show on your favorite listening platform. You can leave us a 5-star review, drop us a comment with a topic you'd like to hear us discuss in an upcoming episode, and you can also keep up with us on Instagram and TikTok. Give us a follow there at Something More Human. Thanks so much.
Thank you.